Hello, my name is John Ratzaf. This is for FTH 212 Striker Fire Pistol. As you can see down below here, I do have everything disassembled. That's how it came for me, and we'll go over the rest of it here in just a second. All right, so back here again. Just want to go over really quick. We just had our firearm totally disassembled. We put it back together. It is in small parts here that I'm going to show you. So, truthfully, it's not a functioning firearm. Although I just want to make sure that everyone knows it's safe. The first thing I'm just going to provide is the slide. There's no ammunition, nothing, but just to cover our bases there. So, first things first with this. The slide houses the key components like the striker and the extractor, and its main job to cycle back and forth during firing. It plays a role in multiple stages of the cycle of operation, including firing, unlocking, extracting, ejecting, and cocking. Our next one here is going to be our barrel. So the function of the barrel is to guide the projectile and contain the pressure from the fired round. Its primary function during the chambering, locking, and firing stages of the cycle of operation. So our recoil spring here, this is the recoil spring assembly. Its job is to absorb rearward energy from the slide and then push the slide forward to chamber the next round. It functions during unlocking, caulking, and the feeding stage. All right, so our frame. So this is our frame. No live ammo, nothing that can't fire, but just want to point that out. So this is the frame. The frame supports all internal components and provides the structure of the handgun itself. Its role throughout the entire cycle of operations by holding everything in alignment. So our trigger too, we'll just talk about the trigger. So the trigger, its function is to release the firing mechanism when pressed. It plays its role during the firing phases by allowing the striker up top here, which we'll talk about in a second, to move forward and strike that primer. So here's our striker or our firing pin. This is the striker. Its job is to strike that primer and of the cartridge and to ignite it. It functions during the firing stage of the cycle of operations. All right, so let's go back here really quick. We're back to, let's talk about our slide here first. So talking about our slide. So a critical dimension of the slide is that the rail spacing and interval tolerances. So if this is out of spec, it can cause binding or unreliable cycling. Common wear points include the slide rails and then just that breech face itself. All right, we'll go back to the barrel here. So the barrel, a critical dimension of the barrel is the chamber and then the bore diameter itself. If this is out of spec, it can cause pressure issues or poor accuracy. Wear typically occurs in the rifling and the chamber throat over time, just like any other firearm. This isn't immune to that. So our recoil spring assembly. A critical factor here is the spring tension. So if the spring is too weak or it's worn out, it can cause failure to feed or return just a battery itself. Wear occurs as the spring fatigues over time, just repeated use, it just gets worn out. All right, our frame. So the critical dimensions include the frame and the pinhole alignment. If these are off, it can affect the entire function of the firearm. Wear typically shows on the rails and the contact points. This back one, just really quick, this one was really tough for me to get in, and it's going to be pretty difficult to get out. So I'll probably wind up having to probably replace that roll pin here pretty quick. Trigger itself within this guy. So the trigger's critical dimensions are the engagement surfaces between the trigger and that sear. So if these are worn out or altered poorly, it can cause an unsafe condition like accidental discharge or failure to fire. Wear occurs at those contact points. And the striker, the critical dimension for the striker tip is that spring tension. If the tip is damaged or the spring is weak, it can cause light primer strikes. Wear usually occurs at the tip of the spring over time. So a few things like a gunsmith really should be properly trained in firearm disassembly. Use of correct tools and understanding tolerances. We should also just follow manufacturer specifications to avoid damaging parts or creating unsafe conditions. Those are kind of just the big things, just training wise, and that's what we're doing, learning with school. Um, uh, Components. So, like the trigger interacts with the sear of the striker. When that trigger is pressed, it releases the striker to fire the round. So specifically, like the slide interacts with the frame rails, the barrel, the recoil spring to just cycle properly. Um, the barrel with the slide during locking and unlocking, um, those are pretty critical. Like replacement trigger example. So like I'm sure we'll probably get into it maybe here in a bit. I haven't looked through all of the class, but I mean, if we're replacing the trigger, a gunsmith specifically could expect it to take, I would say, 20 or 30 minutes, depending on the time frame that we have. Maybe longer. I'm sure some people can knock that out pretty quick. Yeah, I think it's really experience dependent. Um, Especially tools would include like just our like punches, our bench block, and just a hammer. I have a few different ones that work really good that I've gotten through the course of school here. So the cycle of operations begins with feeding, where a round is stripped from the magazine. Feeding, the slide moves forward and strips around from the magazine. Chambering, the round is pushed into the chamber. Locking, the barrel and the slide lock together. Firing, the trigger is pressed and the striker hits the primer. Unlocking, the slide begins moving rearward, unlocking from the barrel. Extracting, the extractor pulls a spent casing from the chamber. And 7, ejecting, the case is ejected from the firearm. And last, number 8, cocking, the striker is reset at the slide as it cycles. All right, I do just really quick want to go ahead and show you here, like I did at the start of the video, the firearm is now assembled. All right, so I do just want to note that this firearm is pointed in a safe direction. There's no magazine here, otherwise we would remove that. I'm going to go ahead and take the slide back, lock it in place. There is no ammunition inside. Down below here, as you can see, and then also here as well, we'll do our check, and then also have this little nifty guy that we can put in there to double check that we don't have anything. Definitely like that. All right, so really quick, I do just want to go over like the cycle of operations here. So kind of the easiest way I can do this is we just cleared the weapon. We know we're in good shape here. So we're going to go ahead and start with number 1, feeding. So we're going to, actually let's open, easier to describe. So we just fed it. We're going to go ahead and chamber it around by moving the slide forward. All right. Now that's also locking the barrel and the slide together. All right. And then firing is pointing in the same direction. There was no ammunition in there. I'll just show it to you again, just on the safe side of things. All right. Firing, we're going to press the trigger and it hits the primer. All right. At that point, it's going to begin the unlocking the slides. The slide begins to move to the rear, and it's going to go forward. At that point, the extractor, it's pulling out that spent cartridge, and it's ejecting at the same time, and then it's going back into that caulking and resetting. So firearm's still pointing in that safe direction. Double check as well. Make sure that you guys know that there's no ammunition in there. So we just want to do that quick, just that functions check. So we're just going to do this by have it to the back up here. This is kind of the only like safety specifically on here. That's good to go. And with that one being said, we're going to actually go ahead and load these dummy rounds really quick in here. That's part of our next video here. Load these dummy rounds up. All right, so these are just dummy rounds specifically. I'm going to go ahead and load them into our pistol here. I'm going to caulk that back. All right, so at this point in time, we're going to go ahead, check that safety. We're going to go ahead and pull the trigger here. At this point, everything is running smoothly with the function check that we have with the dummy rounds. Everything is good to go here. Thank you much.